From MTN News, this is Face the State.
Welcome to another installment of Face the State. I'm Augusta McDonald. We're into the second half of the session, and this is when the big focus is on the state budget. Hours-long meetings in the House Appropriations Committee has lawmakers going section by section, reviewing budgeting proposals for different sectors of the state government. This includes education, infrastructure, and the largest share of the budget, the Department of Health and Human Services. Soon enough, the budget will hit the House floor, and its deadline to move over to the Senate is April 3rd. The legislature is allocating historic amounts of funding to building updates across the state this session. Montana has a long-range building program. State agencies put together lists of proposed large-scale construction projects, then lawmakers decide which ones get funding. Proposals include investments at the Montana State Hospital and across the Montana University system. Right now, the Gianforte administration says extensive work at the Montana State Prison is a priority, including millions to replace aging housing units.
We want to make sure that, one, for our correctional staff, that they're able to work in a safe environment, and we want to make sure for those individuals who are incarcerated in the state of Montana that they are able to serve out their sentence, whatever that may be, in a safe environment.
All of these proposals add up to well over $1 billion, and they're all included in House Bill 5. The legislation is set to receive a hearing in the House Appropriations Committee this week. Governor Greg Gianforte signed several budget bills into law this week. He says tax cuts are historic and include $480 million for income tax rebates of up to $1,250 a person. Another $280 million will fund property tax rebates of up to $500 on primary residences each of the next 2 years. Other bills in the package will lower income tax rates starting in 2024, increase exemptions from the business equipment tax, pay off millions in state debt, and provide funding to secure road and bridge grants.
I think this legislation is a promise delivered. When we ran our campaigns in the fall, we said we're going to shock the public. We are going to actually take money out of the Treasury and give it back to them because we have over-collected.
Montana Democrats are not as thrilled with the package. House Minority Leader Kim Abbott and Senate Minority Leader Pat Flowers said in a joint statement, quote, "What the governor signed into law is over $1 billion in reckless spending that disproportionately benefits the wealthiest Montanans. It does nothing to help working and middle-class families get through our current cost of living crisis."
When Republicans took a 102-seat supermajority in the Montana legislature, that gave them the power to propose changes to the Montana Constitution without Democratic support. So it was widely expected that constitutional amendments would be a big topic of discussion this session.
Anytime we can give the opportunity to the people to be able to decide, I'm all for that.
This week, the House Judiciary Committee has held 4 hearings on constitutional amendment proposals. On Wednesday, they heard a proposal to expand the constitutional right to bear arms, removing an exception for concealed weapons. Earlier bills included one to guarantee a right to hunt, fish, and trap using current means and methods, and another to redefine Montana Regents' authority over college campuses in response to recent court cases. Other upcoming amendments are expected to propose changes in how Supreme Court justices are selected and some abortion-related measures. House Speaker Matt Regier said he expects a dozen or so proposed amendments to get serious consideration.
A lot of great ideas in those, and we'll see out of those 12, 13, 14 that which ones come to the top and go from there.
For a constitutional amendment to move forward in the legislature, it has to receive 100 votes between the House and Senate. After that, it goes on the general election ballot. Republicans stress that it would be up to the voters whether any of these changes are approved. Democrats have accused the majority of attempting to push through amendments that don't have public support. Wednesday at the Capitol, advocacy groups like the ACLU of Montana and Montana Environmental Information Center held a rally opposing constitutional changes.
People are allowed to bring constitutional referenda. It's good. It's a living, evolving document. But what we're seeing is, again, I think a flagrant disregard for the existing provisions.
Organizers said they believe the number of proposed amendments could overwhelm voters.
I think that we're concerned about voter education, voter information, and the invite to out-of-state interest and moneyed interest to pour money into the campaigns and really tip the scales and misinform and mislead people.
Regier says he doesn't see an issue with the number of amendments voters may be asked to consider.
I have 100% confidence in them that they can weigh in and that they can make the right choices. There are multiple other states that have double-digit ballot initiatives. each year on their ballot, and I think it's a good way to get a test on some of these higher priorities, top issues for the state, and let the voters weigh in on that.
Constitutional amendment proposals have a later transmittal deadline than general bills. They'll have to move forward by the start of April in order to stay in consideration. In Helena, Jonathan Amberian, MTN News.
The Montana Office of Public Instruction has released the federally mandated school report cards for 2021 to 2022 school year. The report looks at proficiency and student growth in math and reading, student enrollment, and how much money is spent per student, and graduation rates. For the state as a whole, achievement scores show just over 1/5 of students were considered proficient in math, with just over half of those showing progress. Reading scores showed 29% are considered proficient, with half of those showing progress. 86% of Montana students will graduate high school in 4 years, but just 62%, less than 2/3, are considered college or career ready. And about $13,200 are spent per student, with nearly 90% of that coming at the state and local level. Academic proficiency is measured through the Smarter Balanced Assessments for grades 3 through 8 and the ACT for 11th grade. To learn more about the discussions around charter schools versus public education funding within the Montana Republican Party, I talked to Senate Majority Leader Jason Ellsworth.
I guess, what issues with Montana's public schools do you feel charter schools will effectively resolve or address?
So I think it's another opportunity for parents to get involved in their children's education. So I think it's about choice. So maybe a charter school could focus more individually on students in a smaller group setting, some kind of opportunity like that. So it really comes down to choice, and having parents have a choice of where do they want their children to participate at their education level.
And do you think that charter schools should be accessible to students of every income bracket, or are these specifically I'm like targeting dollars toward more like private schools?
No. So the way I look at this is an opportunity for parents to make decisions on their children's education. And to me, it wouldn't matter what, income bracket you're in. You should have that opportunity to, help steer your kid's education and where it's going to be fundamentally good for your child. So dollars should never be an issue. And therein lies the question is, how do you deal with, paying for that? Do you use A and B money? How does that work? What does that mean for, public schools? So this is a big policy decision. And again, I think we can look at other states that have been successful, like Florida, and maybe mimic a situation like that.
But Florida and Montana are very different landscapes in terms of, rural, like a lot of rural areas in Montana don't have a private school option. There might be some homeschool kids, but there isn't this like a large enough population in most of the state. And so I think there's a question of, if we're going to be taking money from the public schools and putting it into other forms of education, what does that mean for the majority of public school students in Montana?
And therein lies the question. So those are the discussions we want to have with the public. And we also want to have with educators and see what the best choices are for individual students. So again, we want good participation from the public, but we've heard from the public that they want an opportunity for charter schools. Now, are we Florida? No, but we can take potentially a model of how they did it and maybe have that option here. Or we can look at another state. Florida does have rural areas too. It's not all one big city. At the same time, that is the question, is how do you handle this? Can you utilize A and B money? How would it affect public schools? And certainly I'm for public schools as well. So I don't want to see public schools get hurt in any way, shape, or form. So that is the question.
The Montana Legislature starts the week in full swing, beginning their final month-and-a-half stretch. MTN's Andy Curtis tells us about a bill that many outdoor enthusiasts will be watching closely.
There are a lot of big decisions being made up here at the state capitol right now, but one bill being tossed around Helena at the moment could impose some pretty big consequences if you're caught trespassing while hunting for one of these. House Bill 548, introduced by Representative Jill Cohnauer, would potentially up the penalty for trespassing on private or FWP managed property like Sun River WMA during restricted dates, while shed hunting from a misdemeanor to criminal trespassing. That could result in a hefty fine or even jail time. Cohnauer told me with the price hunters could sell antlers for right now, more enforcement is needed.
The numbers are $16 to $19 a pound. A lot of people in a misdemeanor trespass, they're okay with that, right? It makes them money. So we want to make sure that that ethical behavior for all hunters on all lands is taken care of within our code.
And jail time might not even be the biggest penalty in this new bill.
To be able to take away the hunting and fishing license, that's a really good deterrent.
That's right. Another set of teeth in HB 548 is the possibility of losing your hunting, fishing, or trapping privileges here in Montana for up to 24 months. But Cohnauer told me this bill is aimed at stopping those repeat offenders and not your typical hunter or hiker.
So it allows for a judge or, a law enforcement officer to basically deal with the situation as it is. In most cases, what we've seen out on the land with our farming and ranching folks is that they have already told people to get off multiple times. And so they already have seen this guy, they know it. By the time they are calling law enforcement in to take care of this, basically they've already told them multiple times.
She's not alone in her thinking. This bill is getting some support from conservation groups as well.
We think it's a great bill. We've been hearing from a lot of outdoor recreationists, hunters, landowners that this is becoming a problem. And from our perspective, this is about protecting not only the public resource. At that time of year when folks are doing that, for the most part, we should be leaving wildlife alone to kind of restock their supplies after a long, hard winter. The other problem, obviously, is the private property rights. We should never be trampling on someone's private property rights. And when we're trespassing to get sheds, as fun as it is to shed hunt, we are violating someone's personal property. And so we feel like this is good for both the resource as well as for landowners.
Now, the bill has passed the Montana House and is awaiting action in the Montana Senate. To follow along with everything that's going on up here at the Capitol, check out our website. Reporting in Helena, Andy Curtis, MTN News.
Thank you, Andy. And you heard from Republicans earlier. Coming up, Jackie Coffin sits down with House Minority Leader Kim Abbott for a mid-session check-in as Face the State continues.
Welcome back to Face the State.
How did the first half of the legislative session go for Democrats?
I think our caucus did a good job, I think, of setting out our priorities early. And you've heard them from us before. It's permanent property tax relief. It's making sure that childcare is affordable and accessible. That's important for families and for businesses. And same thing with housing that people can afford. These are big priorities. We push those ideas, and we've been holding, I think, the Republican majority accountable to failing to meet the scale of the crisis on those things. And the other big one, of course, is behavioral health, and making sure that we're supporting the infrastructure of mental health care in the state of Montana. And so we came out and I think had strong proposals, really sort of focused on what we can do for working families in Montana. You may have noticed that a lot of those ideas were not embraced by the Republican majority and the governor's office. They really focused their first 45 days on attacking the basic constitutional rights of people in our communities, whether they're women or LGBTQ people. They have $2.6 billion in spending proposals outside of normal budget operations. That is reckless. That is a spending spree that I actually cannot believe. And it's probably more than that now. That was as of last Friday. So, I think the contrast between the Democratic caucus, our priorities, and what we want to deliver for Montanans, and what the Republican majority has done couldn't be clearer. And they're they're just not focused on the problems that Montana businesses, Montana families are facing.
And so let's talk about bill passage just before the transmittal deadline. How was the Democrats' batting record for getting any legislation through? I saw bills by Democrats already signed by by Governor Gianforte, so things are moving through. And how would you kind of compare it to last session too? For we saw a lot of legislation in 2021 getting punted to certain committees and never moving out. Has that been a similar experience this time, or has it been more successful?
So I'll answer your first question first, which is, I think that we had, a lot of success moving good policy in the first half of the session. Representative Cafaro was able to push a life-changing raise for providers, $25 million provider rate increase off the floor. That's an appropriations, but that was a big vote on the floor of the House. She got over 60 votes. Like, that's bipartisan energy around solving a problem, which is exciting. On housing, Representative Fern was able to authorize additional funding for the Coal Trust Homes program. Big deal. That's a successful program that we need to invest more in. Representative Buckley got her 12-month birth control prescription bill through. So, that's a big deal for healthcare and reproductive healthcare. Windy Boy was able to move the Montana Indian Child Welfare Act out of committee and off the floor. A big deal, considering the Supreme Court decision that's about to come down at the federal level. And then Representative Running Wolf was able to move his package of missing, murdered Indigenous people bills through. And that's exciting too. And I think one of those actually has already gotten signed. So, when you consider our numbers, I think we're doing pretty well for 32. I think moving those priorities through. In terms of a contrast to last session, I think it's the nature of this building and this process that there are going to be some committees where legislation that the Republican majority does not want to see a floor debate on goes. And that's still true. I think that they've locked up a number of things in committees that they don't want a floor debate on for whatever reason. And I think it's largely the same as last session.
So the next 45 days or the rest of the session, what are Democrats' priorities? What are you guys going to be trying to do? And what do you think are the big issues in the legislature?
Yeah, I think the back half of the session always sort of narrows and you get a lot of focus on the budget. So yesterday, the appropriations team started going through executive action on the various sections of the budget. I think they got through B and they didn't get through D. Honestly, that process right now feels very rushed to me for no reason. It seems like an artificially fast process. I know that we've been hearing from constituents that they didn't realize the action was getting taken on B, like people that really want to follow the process, that want to see what their members are doing, didn't realize what was happening. And so we're going to really push the chair to be more public about the schedule so that Montanans can continue to weigh in and follow the budget. I mean, it's a document of our values. It's what services we want to fund for our constituents, and it's important that people get to weigh in. But I think there'll be a lot of focus on the budget in the second half. And for us, our priorities don't change.
It's a big piece of legislation to follow. Lots of pieces within it. Yeah. Anything else you think Montanans should be watching that you'd like to flag coming up?
I think to the extent that folks can really pay attention to the budget discussion and what we're investing in, I mean, that's the question. Are your representatives, the people that are, representing you here in this building, are they addressing the issues that your community is facing? Or are they national talking points? And right now, I have to say that I don't know what the average Republican or independent voter thought that they were going to get when they voted down ballot for a Republican legislative candidate. But if it was conservative values, I don't think they're getting that in this building. it's what we're seeing in this chamber is punitive, controlling, invasive, it's mean, and it's expensive. So I would pay attention to what your representatives are actually focused on up here, and the budget is a good way to do that.
Well, I think that's all I have for you today, Kim. Thanks so much.
Welcome back to Face the State.
Welcome back to Face the State. Happening at the state capitol, a bill to define a person's sex throughout Montana law as male or female just passed a preliminary vote on the Senate floor. Supporters say the bill was about creating a definition for sex separate from gender. Opponents believe it's not only discriminatory against transgender Montanans, but could have potential financial consequences from the federal government.
On a bill of this size and of this importance, to what degree is it responsible for our body to sign off on that bill that may or may not create substantial future costs to our general fund?
We can have policy discussions about where we want to use these terms later, but we need to define what those terms mean, because right now we're getting into lawsuits because these terms get conflated and we don't have clear definitions.
The bill will have to pass a final vote on the Senate floor before passing on to the House. March is Women's History Month, and we're taking a look at decades of attempts to ratify a measure that would guarantee equal rights for all, regardless of sex. The proposed Equal Rights Amendment was originally written in 1923. Reporter Kellen Howell has this.
What do we want? ERA! When do we want it? Now!
100 years after it was first introduced in Congress, the campaign to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment is still going.
Think of it this way. If not for Congress standing in the way, the ERA would already be on the books.
Suffragist Alice Paul first wrote the ERA in 1920. The amendment aimed to enshrine equal rights for women as the law of the land under the U.S. Constitution. It was first introduced in Congress in 1923, where it sat idle for decades. With the 60s came the civil rights movement and a renewed energy around women's equality.
ERA was an example of social change that they immediately lumped together with all the social changes of the 60s that people either applauded or resisted.
And in 1971, the ERA passed in the House and in the Senate a year later. It read, "Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex." Congress imposed a 7-year deadline for 38 states to ratify the amendment, tipping off an intense nationwide campaign from supporters, led by feminist icons like Betty Friedan and Gloria Steinem.
Women as the chattel, the possession, the thing owned by the man. There's still a lot left of that in the law. And those are the inequalities that the Equal Rights Amendment would take away.
But they were met with fierce opposition from anti-ERA groups, led by conservative activist Phyllis Schlafly.
ERA doesn't do anything at all for women. It doesn't give them any benefits, any rights, any opportunities that we don't have now.
Schlafly, who founded the conservative Eagle Forum, argued that the ERA would remove gender protections benefiting housewives, would make women eligible for the military draft, and that it would shift power away from the states to the federal government.
And she was a brilliant organizer.
After 7 years, only 35 states had ratified the ERA, and although Congress extended the deadline for another 3 years, no other states ratified it in time. In recent years, in the wake of the Me Too movement, the ERA has gained renewed support, and in 2020, Virginia became the 38th state to ratify it.
The resolution has finally passed.
Now, members of Congress are proposing a new bipartisan resolution that would erase the 7-year deadline from the ERA, making it eligible for adoption in the Constitution.
What we're trying to say here is what has happened in the states should not die here in the Senate.
But opponents still echo some of the concerns of Schlafly and the anti-ERA movement of the 70s.
Locker rooms, prisons, hospital rooms, domestic violence shelters, and restrooms would allow men into areas where women should feel safe and protected and have privacy.
With Republicans controlling the House of Representatives and a conservative majority on the Supreme Court, DeHart says it's unlikely that the ERA will wind up in the Constitution soon.
I'm not very sanguine about its passage, and I'm not very sanguine about whether with the present court it would make the difference that we always hoped it would.
Kellen Howell, Scripps News, Washington.
After this, we're taking a look at what's coming up at the Montana Legislature next week. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Face the State.
Welcome back. Joining us now, MTN senior political reporter Jonathan Ambarian with what we can expect for next week. It's a big budget week, Jonathan. What are you watching?
Yeah, of course, we've been waiting for the budget to come up big in the second half of the session. And so this week, the House Appropriations Committee, which is the big budget committee on the House side, it's the first one that deals with the budget. They passed through the budget bill, the big budget bill, House Bill 2. It's, a huge amount of money all in that one big bill. They've been working on it for 2 months, and now it's going to go to the House floor. That's scheduled to happen on Wednesday. And what'll happen is that they'll have discussions all day on the House floor, starting in the morning, going all through the day. Last couple of sessions, it's only taken a day. Previous sessions, it sometimes took longer than that. But usually it's taken about a day, and they go through, and if there are any amendments that people want to make to the budget, they can do that anywhere in the budget bill. And if there are 51 votes for it, they can get that put on there. And so we'll see if there's any changes they want to make. We're going to see proposals, especially dealing with things like provider rates for healthcare providers and things like that. But they've been proposing these all through and haven't been able to get them on yet, but I'm sure we'll still see them on there, and we'll see if there are ones that have enough support to get added.
Jonathan, thank you so much for your work. We'll be checking in with you next week.
Thanks, Augusta. Thanks for having me.